So, Mark, we have a dress code.
We do. I did not set the dress code.
No, it came from higher up.
I may have been the reason or contributed to
why we have the dress code.
Why we have a dress code. But Morningstar is very casual, and this is the only office in the world that has a dress code.
Yes.
Let's get into the episode, because this is a listener-requested episode.
It is, and it's on something that we both have absolutely no idea about, and that's kids.
Which we think is fair, because most of the things we see on social media about investing, the people that are putting that up, they don't have any investments. Yeah. We don't have any kids, so I think
Let's not create any enemies, Mark.
Okay. Well, we've annoyed the whole social media investing community, but we don't have any kids. But we're not going to talk about how to raise your kids. We are going to talk about putting your kids through private school, because that was the question.
Yes. I mean, if you did have advice on how to raise a kid, what would you say?
My mother listens to this, so there's nothing good I can say about that.
All right. So the Investing Compass listener that requested this episode wanted us to take a look at how parents can lessen the blow of private school fees and the opportunity cost between other financial goals and sending kids to private school.
And we are told that kids are a significant commitment, apparently. So part and parcel is the meaningful cost of education. Education costs can start almost immediately with preschool. It does not give parents much time to prepare financially. So the financial commitments increase, of course, as you get into primary school and secondary school. So it is something that parents need to plan for.
And Mark, you recently mentioned that you were stressed about these costs when you were younger and you started saving for your non-existent kid very early. And if you were to have children, you really would have wanted to prepare. The Cost of Education Index from Futurity Group looks to illustrate the cost of education and how it changes year to year. And the latest edition shows that education costs for a child that starts public school in 2025 in a major city will be up to $123,294 to year 12.
Which is a lot. And I was saving for post-year 12.
Yeah.
I was saving for university.
Oh, okay.
Which, given that this child
that's
would
an
have...
assumption.
I know. Inheriting my genes probably wasn't a good assumption, but...
I mean, would you have saved for some contingency for like failed courses or...
Well, hopefully my parents did, because that's what happened. But back to not my hypothetical child, but actual children. So that figure you gave, Shani, $123,294, we do need to be clear that many families will actually pay less than that amount. So included in that are large amounts of ancillary costs, including private tuition, sports equipment, transport. But at the same time, we see some prestigious private schools charging upwards of $50,000 per year. And I know that you wrote an article on this and named a couple examples in Sydney, which we'll leave out of this, but you can Google expensive private schools, right?
Sydney.
Yeah, which I think is what you did. And they charge those fees of upwards of $50,000 for in 2025 in years 11 and 12. So the cost for private schools, of course, can vary, but it is a significant cost. And these fee increases are outpacing inflation consistently.
And it's difficult for parents to prepare for costs this large in such a short time frame. It is particularly difficult as costs continue to rise, and those ancillary costs can be difficult to estimate as you move forward. According to research from EdStart, the average increase in private school fees was 4.1% in 2024 compared to a 3.4% inflation rate. Over the last decade, private school fees have increased by 60% compared to 25% for inflation.
So that's a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some good news. I don't know if this counts as good news. I guess there are ways that parents can prepare for this that hopefully will lessen that burden a little bit. And there are, of course, important opportunity costs to consider if you are thinking about more expensive education. So let's start with a properly costed goal. So the key to a successful goal is to come up with an educated estimate about how much this financial goal will cost. Many parents know what school they would like to send their child to. The annual fees are easy enough to find out, and historical increases can be used to estimate future costs. More challenging are the costs above tuition that must be considered.
and you have no idea whether your child is going to be a musical prodigy or be great at football, it'll be tough to understand precise costings, but in this case, averages can be used as a goalpost until you have more clarity as your child gets older. Or you could be the child that needs a professional musician to step in at their concert and play behind the curtains like Mark did.
I would like to add that was included in my tuition.
Oh, okay. Not an extra cost.
There's no extra cost for that.
That's value.
My trumpet lessons where I didn't learn anything.
Yes.
Those probably cost extra.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. But thank you. This is turning into just embarrassing me, but I have some good stories about you, which I'll get to. But some of the costs that you might want to consider above tuition and those yearly increases that you should factor in are these extracurriculars that Shani was talking about. And of course, private tuition, if that's something you want to do for your children. So this Futurity investment group have estimates for each of those ancillary costs. And they also have a cost estimator that can help you get a better idea.
So for the purpose of costing this goal, we will use the averages that they provide for each type of school, including those ancillary costs. And you'll likely be able to have a more precise estimate based on potential schools you're considering.
So for major cities, government schools, 123,294. That's the figure you gave before, Shani. For independent schools,
so these are
private schools, 350,158, which is very specific.
It is.
Make sure you get that 158.
Yes.
For Catholic schools, 193,666.
That's
little
a
strange.
coincidence.
Yeah. 666 for the Catholic schools. For regional and remote areas, around $80,000 for government, $153,000 for Catholic, and $244,000 for independent. And those numbers are population weighted and projected over a 13-year period. And they are, of course, a guide only. Anything can happen.
So let's start with the ways that you're able to plan and prepare for school fees through investing. And unlike retirement savings, where individuals typically have decades to accumulate wealth, school fees are a short to medium term financial goal. This requires a more immediate and strategic approach to investment and income generation. So it does require some cash flow flexibility.
So we can start with income-focused investments. Passive income is a tool utilized to fund a variety of financial goals. It is particularly used for goals that require ongoing funding, such as education. The first step is understanding the income that you're going to be able to generate. This will change, but there are several main asset classes that issue income. There is property. So, of course, rent. Gross yield sits between 4 and 5% since 2010. I would say that you are not going to get that if you buy an investment property right now. But anyway, I guess that's nice. There's fixed income and cash. So interest, 3 to 4% over the last 10 years. Then there's shares, managed funds, ETFs, and you get dividends and distributions. Around 3 to 5% over the last 10 years with Aussie shares, an additional 1 to 2% for franking credits, according to the ATO. So it is important to note that these are gross returns. Different asset classes attract different levels of fees. There's transaction costs, maintenance costs, and taxes. When you receive income, tax needs to be paid on it. So keep that in mind when assessing your return.
And you don't need to prescribe to one church and can diversify across these asset classes. The general rule is that the more secure the income stream, the lower the return. Any income investing strategy should consider that sustainability of that income stream, especially because you're probably going to send your kid to school for 13 years, unless they really cook it. So I'm going to keep this simple and invest in shares and managed funds, ETFs. So for this example, I'll use the Vanguard High Yield Index Managed Fund. The 5-year distribution is 5.54% at 31 January 2025. So to simplify this example, I will take a conservative franking rebate of 1% and bring the total income to 6.54%. And because I've used a managed fund, there are no brokerage costs to consider, like with shares and ETFs, or any maintenance costs such as you would have with house repairs for property or any sort of maintenance costs that you do have with property. So then we do need to consider tax. So for someone on a median salary of $100,000, the effective tax rate is about 23%, but you can work out your own using websites like paycalculator.com.au. And so really there's a simple multiplication by 100 to get that effective tax rate, and that brings your net return to approximately 5.03%. And the math is pretty simple from there. What is the capital base you need to generate the school fees with a 5.03% return? So divide the school fees by 5.03%. If we look at an average cost of an independent school in a metro city, this is $27,000. So the capital base you'll need is $535,000. And this, of course, assumes that you do not draw down on the capital.
So this is easy, obviously. So all you need to do, if you make $100,000 a year and you want to send your kid to a private school that costs $27,000 a year, all you have to do is save 5 times
your annual
your
salary.
pre-tax salary.
Per child.
Per child.
Yeah, so if you have more than one.
Yeah. Then invest it in Shani's managed fund, and then your child can go to school.
Yes.
I mean,
and you'll have the capital at the end.
Yeah, it's making buying property seem
Sound
like
pretty attractive.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously we're joking around about that, but that is a really large capital base that's not feasible for most people. So you could, of course, adjust your goal. As we mentioned at the beginning of this example, you may be happy to receive 50% of your income payments from this fund. You could adjust your goal down to reach it quicker and supplement your short-term savings for school fees. So there are a lot of different options, and there's some flexibility. This goal may work for parents who have access to large capital bases through inheritance or savings. With this strategy, the capital base is not being touched, which allows it to be repurposed for future goals after your child gets out of, year 12 in this case. So that could be retirement, it could be travel, anywhere you want to redirect that passive income. As the funds would be sitting outside of superannuation, it could be used to fund an early retirement. We've talked about that bridge to retirement that you need outside of superannuation. So the averages, of course, from the Futurity group account for school fee increases. So inflation does not need to be accounted for until the capital is repurposed for another goal. So Shani wrote a travel goals article.
And we also did a podcast on it.
Yeah, where we go through the impacts of inflation and then the strategies to account for it with passive income.
And obviously this was a situation that not a lot of people will be in, where they do have such a large capital base. So we'll go through some more. There's also purpose-built investment products, so education bonds. We won't go into too much detail here in terms of the trade-offs of education bonds versus investment accounts. I've written an article on that, so you'll be able to find an in-depth look at the vehicles and the pluses and minuses in that article. But the main point to note about education bonds is that they have specific tax advantages for investors, but have strict withdrawal and spending requirements to be eligible for those tax advantages.
And one point to make about education bonds is they do require a little bit of planning. They do not immediately help parents who have acquired an education bond at the birth of their child. They're required to reach a maturity of 10 years to access the tax benefits.
All right. Then there's offset accounts and mortgage strategies. So this is another strategy where parents can prepare for school fees by maintaining an offset account balance to help with cash flow flexibility.
And if you own your home, you could also homeschool your kid, which is free, except for all your time.
I mean, you could also homeschool them regardless.
That is true. You could homeschool your kid in a rented apartment.
Yes.
So there we go. Building capital in an offset account is a tax-effective way to approach school fees. Unlike investment fees, your offset is not taxable, which can provide significant savings, especially for parents that are in higher tax brackets. The main point to work out here is something called a hurdle rate. So the hurdle rate is the interest that you are saving from holding funds in your offset and how that compares to your net investment returns. So not just the investment return you're getting, but what you're receiving after fees and taxes and other costs.
And you've made everyone's lives very easy, Mark, because you have a hurdle rate spreadsheet that allows you to calculate your own to understand what strategy might work best between the mortgage and your offset or investment accounts.
You know who hasn't made my life easy, though?
Who?
The government.
Okay,
Because
here we go.
No, when the tax rates change, I have not updated my hurdle rate spreadsheet yet. So I need to go back and do that.
Okay.
Because the change in the marginal tax rates
will impact that, obviously.
As we've talked about, we do need to account for taxes.
So you've got, 4 days before you've got to do that. So.
Well, there we go. At least I have nothing else to do in the next 4 days. So back to this mortgage offset and hurdle rate, the interest savings from building the offset does require, of course, a bit of mental accounting when we're redirecting those to school fees. But at the same time, these does assist in reducing the debt owned on your home. This can significantly increase your quality of life, especially in retirement, where housing is one of the largest costs. Reducing or eliminating that cost by retirement can help with the longevity of retirement savings and stability in retirement. And then you can pass that fully paid off house to your child that you've spent so much money educating, which is nice. So remember, there are no fees or tax on an offset account. The return that you will receive will be the interest amount you're saving. So currently 6% is a decent reflection of the interest rates you would receive on a variable owner occupied loan.
So that's a quick rundown choosing between the options on how to save and invest for school fees, but that was only one part of the question that we got from the listener. And she wanted to know, what am I giving up? Which is a deep question.
Yeah. How long do you have? So now the two people that have chosen not to have kids,
I know.
We'll talk about what you've given up. And we're obviously not here to persuade parents to choose one option over another. It's a deeply personal choice about where you educate your children and what is best for them. It is important, however, to understand the consequences of the decisions that you make and how that changes the options and opportunities available to you.
And we'll link an article to this episode that runs through the assumptions that we've made for the next part. But Futurity offers a schedule of expected payments for tuition. So we looked at the cost of a child that was born in 2021, and we went to school in a metro school.
So if the funds were invested elsewhere over the years of schooling, before taxes and costs, an investment account returning 7% a year would result in $258,645 for a government school, $671,637 for independent, and $334,386 for a Catholic education. Now, obviously, you need to send your kid to school somewhere.
Yes.
So
you might be in trouble.
Yes. So you're going to have to take the differences between those. But there is a big difference, right? $258,000 for a government school, $671,000. So basically, that's the opportunity cost. So independent school, $294,000 is the opportunity cost, $75,000 to send your kid to a Catholic school. For someone whose child is born when they're 30, and we extend that, this is an opportunity cost of $995,000 if retiring at 65. If they go to an independent school. So depending upon all those ancillary costs, trumpet lessons, and whatnot, those are included in the assumptions versus other things you may do. It could be larger.
And there's also the opportunity cost for lifestyle. Often large costs like this mean that they are detracting from other financial goals. This will differ from person to person. Could the amount that you're spending towards tuition mean that you will have a later retirement than you would like, or you'd have to cut back on holidays, hobbies, or expenses? And like the Investing Compass listener who requested this episode, many parents have a preference for a type of school and are willing to sacrifice on lifestyle.
Yeah, there's a quote that my father-in-law always says, he doesn't like listening to my voice, but he reads the podcast transcripts. And
he's like, I've got to listen to him enough. So.
Yeah, exactly. His quote is either you fly first class or your kids do. But as somebody married to his kids,
neither's happening. Yeah.
And the other consideration with all of this is not, of course, to be selfish and take this money. You could also set your kids up with it. So that's something else to consider. If the money is not going to be spent on education, what are the other opportunities you have to further their lives? So they could receive almost $300,000 upon leaving a government school compared to an independent school, or $76,000 compared to a Catholic school. So if the investment is then held on to your child's 30th birthday, could be $710,000 at a 7% return. if you invested in that Vanguard, that Vanguard high yield managed fund you were talking about, it would throw off almost $40,000 a year in passive income with the capital untouched.
And I've never had to make the choice about where to send kids to school. And there are many benefits to each type of schooling that have been weighed up. But it is a personal choice. And whatever option you do choose, there are multiple ways to prepare for the costs associated with education. Find the one that works for you and your family by understanding the true return that you're getting after fees and costs.
Yeah. Do you ever think about this? Because you do make choices with Priscilla.
Whether to send him to school?
Well, no, he has an anxiety problem.
He does.
And so you made the choice of getting like a dog sitter during the day.
Yes.
So that's a choice. You could spend that money elsewhere.
I could, yeah.
So maybe we'll do
better kibble or I don't know.
Or just on yourself.
Yeah.
You could be selfish and say, I don't care about your anxiety. So maybe if anyone's interested, send us an email if you would like to hear an opportunity cost episode on things you do with your dog. We'll get lots of emails for that. But anyway, thank you very much for listening. We hope that this is useful and it helped to frame some of these decisions that you make around education.
This video has been prepared for clients of Morningstar Australasia Pty Ltd and or New Zealand wholesale clients of Morningstar Research Ltd. Any general advice has been provided without reference to your financial objectives, situation or needs. You should consider the advice in light of these matters and any relevant product disclosure statement before making any decision to invest. To obtain advice for your own situation, contact a financial advisor.